Hello and welcome to OverVolted. I am your host, Kirk. We have with us Jim, Aurelian, and Matthew. Everyone say hi.
All right, guys.
Hi.
We're condensing this a little bit because we got a lot to talk about today.
Yeah.
First and foremost, obviously, is the 7nm slip. So let's go ahead and start with that.
Yeah, I'll take this one away then, as you guys all talked about it in the last podcast, which I was not involved in. Before I start this, let me just say as well, as a disclaimer, I'm kind of on vacation here, as Jenny has like a month's vacation from her work. And I decided I would take one as well. And then, of course, this whole Intel 7nm thing kicked off, and I have been belaboured with new information constantly being flooded into my email inboxes and private messages and people calling me. And it's, my vacation hasn't even remotely started yet. You notice there wasn't a video this week, but I have been working constantly, just flat out on this whole thing regarding Intel. And, I actually had 5 people, including 3 new people, contacting me with info right after I made the video on Intel 7nm problems. And I'll just tell you some of the quotes of some of what I get told. The first one said that Intel 7nm actually won't be that bad. It's just that it's going to arrive so late that it's going to be a disaster regardless, simply because of the time to market. There's another new one who is less than complimentary about Raja, saying that I really hope they get rid of Raja next. I'm going to skip the next part, what they said about him. But they also said that one API, which appears to be one of Raja's babies, the whole one API thing.
Yeah.
That's a total joke, and so is DG2. One of my leakers is one of the guys that gives me a lot of information, let's just say, and he's almost always correct, says that DG2 is still on track to tape out in late 2020. And there is a tentative agreement in place there for DG2 to be fabricated at TSMC 6nm. So some kind of confirmation there of news you might have seen elsewhere.
Or, something from January.
Yeah, or something going that far back. And I had yet another source who said that they work in software, said that they had never even seen any indication of DG2 yet. And that would actually line up with the fact that it hasn't yet taped out. Yes? If it's not taped out yet, then the software guys, obviously, they're not going to have anything back to work with. And therefore, it's maybe running a little bit late. But that's all right, because this is Intel and everything runs late. But possibly the most interesting information I got, this is also from another source who gives me a lot of stuff, but I don't always use it, as it's perhaps not really all that interesting to our viewers, who are obviously more interested in the CPU and the GPU side of things. Now, let me just bring up a slide. Intel Grand Ridge, which is the follow-up to Snow Ridge, which is their 5G base station thing, the system on chip. This was pretty cool, I thought, getting this Intel Grand Ridge. And we know that the atom cores within Snow Ridge are called Tremont. The atom cores inside Grand Ridge will be called Crestmont.
Yeah, that looks like it says Gracemont on
What does it say that?
On the graph.
Did I miss it?
In the block diagram. Is that not Gracemont? I haven't heard of Crestmont.
But apparently Crestmont will support AVX2. And the clock speeds are up to 2.6 gigahertz, as we can see here on this image that I got hold of. I thought what was interesting here, though, up to 2-channel DDR5. So this is some kind of proof that Intel is finally moving along here. And it's worth remembering that Snow Ridge is doing pretty well from what I've been told. And although their CPU and their GPU divisions are having something of a disaster, ongoing disaster, they're doing all right in other areas, yeah? So this 5G baseband stuff, it's actually doing all right for them. And they've managed to pump the clock speeds up at another 400 megahertz as well. However, this is where this gets interesting. Down the bottom, the process technology, Intel 7nm, and there's this HLL Plus thing, which we tried to find out what it meant, but I'm not entirely sure we could figure it out. If anybody knows what this HLL plus means, then be sure to let us know.
Yeah, the only thing we could really find was some mention here in something called an avalanche drift diode, where they talk about moving from these different technologies like IceMOS and whatnot to HLL. So we're assuming it's to help ensure better quality of lines. I'm not sure if you saw some of the images showing what the 10, I think, nanometer etching looks like, where it's just kind of a mess. It's not very straight and it's not very well defined. They showed a comparison between that and TSMC, I think.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah,
I just forget where it was, but I think the HLL is to help make those lines straighter, make it look a lot more like the EUV process. So,
yeah, I mean, that could make sense then.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Well, this source also told me that Intel's got a second variant of Foveros in the works. And we know that Foveros, one that we've got so far.
Lakefield,
yeah, I'll just bring that one up. And we can see that it had the 14 nanometer kind of like IP block or the IO block. And that was 10 nanometer compute die, yeah?
No, it had 22 nanometer IO die.
Was it 22 IO?
Yes.
Right, okay. 22 IO and 10 compute dies, yeah? Right. Well, this new one, Foveros 2, let's just call it, it's got 10 nanometer IP block, including stuff like for network and crypto or security. And the compute is now 7 nanometers. And that's all connecting with like EMIB and stuff like that.
Is it Ponte Vecchio?
Wasn't told. I wasn't actually told that. But the really, really interesting thing about this was apparently, I don't know if this source was talking about Grand Ridge or Foveros or whatever, but apparently, obviously Intel has got some kind of 7 nanometer chips samples, yeah? And what they intend to do is switch over, because 7 nanometers late, there's problems with the yield. They're actually going to backport. You know how we've seen all those slides showing the 7 being backported to 10?
Yeah.
They're going to backport it over to 10. These system on chips. I don't know if they'll do that with this Grand Ridge or not. But there are plans for Intel CPUs or systems on chip to be backported to 10. However, they intend to show the performance using these 7 nanometer samples.
Oh no.
Yeah. That's what I was told, and I thought, oh, Intel, you.
That's bad.
That's mischaracterization altogether.
That's really bad, actually, because like these are 7 nanometers is supposed to be on par with whatever TSMC has.
From what I've been told, the 7 nanometer is actually pretty decent. It's just late. Yeah, that's all that was wrong with it. And well, here's the thing: that was their plan. Now that it's been outed, let's see if they're brazen enough to stick with it.
One thing we should probably point out, maybe we should start doing this ourselves, is Intel in their Grand Ridge slide, when they called out the process technology as 7 nanometer, they labeled it as Intel 7 nanometer.
Oh yeah, good point, yeah.
And so because Intel is going to start using outside fabs for some of their products, like DG2 and stuff, we might have to start specifying which of their chips are on Intel processes like 7 nanometer versus TSMC processes like 7 nanometer.
Yeah.
So they just might mention 7 nanometers and Intel 7 nanometers in some places.
And this does give us kind of a hint that at least internally for Intel, they're having to make that differentiation, because maybe they have more than one part that might end up being external. Who knows? I'm
pretty sure they will do. You know, it's an interesting talking point, and I was going to do a video on it. Like the whole thing, like what happens next now with Intel. And to be honest with you, I probably will still do that video after a couple of weeks of vacation or something. But,
if you can get a vacation.
Yeah, if I could manage to squeeze one in amongst all the calls and stuff.
Yeah, crap hits the fan while you were planning a vacation. Now you don't get to be on vacation yet.
This is actually what happened last year as well with me, and the year before, I think. and probably the year before, which is why it feels like I haven't had one in like 4 years. In all honesty, it does slow down every so often, but you never know when it's going to happen in the tech world. And it's just one of those things, yeah. All this kicking off, end of July, it's not really what you expect, but that's what happened.
We'll just insert a picture of you like hiking a mountain somewhere. Just show a hat and a backpack. This is Jim. He's out in the woods somewhere.
Yeah, enjoying his vacation.
Yes, with a cell phone in hand.
Yeah, but that was pretty much that.
But you have to use a kilt.
I have to use a kilt. I have to wear a kilt. I'm not sure I've got the legs for that, to be honest.
Yeah, and the mosquitoes would be killer if you had a kilt.
If we don't have mosquitoes, well, not in Scotland. We have midges, which are far, far worse than mosquitoes. Any day will tell you that. Have you ever been to Scotland and you get, attacked by a cloud of midges? Oof. But anyway, that's enough for that one. I just wanted to go over the new stuff that I got, as I haven't really talked about it, and I thought there was some interesting stuff in there. But there will probably be a much more in-depth video on all of this, a bit more analysis at a later date. Moving on next to Matthew, you want to go over this?
Okay. So this is kind of sort of mostly my leak, but Jim ran it over and he was like, yeah, it looks fine. And so it was just a big Intel info dump about the graphics. Just to summarize, with Arctic Sound, basically the XE, and I'm going to call it XE because people were saying they didn't like the way I was pronouncing it in the last podcast. So I'll pronounce it correctly. So XE HP Arctic Sound, that is the multi-tile / die GPU that you've probably seen like teased by Raja. We had a leak. Someone else published the slides for it. That Arctic Sound and DG1 XELP mobile / discrete graphics, they will be put under the same umbrella brand, the Arctic Sound family. And the reason why they have done this, or they will do this, is because the Arctic Lake XE HP, the big one, didn't get any design wins with any OEM or any company that like needs like data center GPUs. So nobody wants this. So Intel has concocted a scheme to make it look like that XE Arctic Sound looks good by calling DG1 in a server setting Arctic Sound.
Now here's the thing, they've done something kind of similar with Tiger Lake. You remember a recent article where it said something about Tiger Lake XE graphics? They never used XE in that context before, did they? And then all of a sudden...
Well, I don't know.
I've never seen it, at least. It was always just Tiger Lake. But now all of a sudden, Tiger Lake XE, and I'm thinking, well, okay, this is another way to sort of tie in this whole brand here, maybe make it look like it's not a complete flop. I mean, the more you kind of spread it out a bit, then...
Now that I think about it, I don't think Intel has ever really acknowledged that DG1 and XE and Tiger Lake are the same. I'm sure they've said it like once, and that's it.
Well, there was a slide recently. I think it might even have been our friend Ryan Shrout, that was talking about it. I can't remember exactly, but
I don't remember this.
It definitely gave me the feeling that they were maybe trying to ride a little bit on the coattails of Tiger Lake, because we all know that Tiger Lake GPU or the IGP was pretty nice.
Yeah, but it's
go to crap after that.
It's actually, in my opinion, the CPU part is more compelling because,
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, sure, it's only a quad core, but I mean, like, it's decently fast at least. But as with the GPU, I mean, that's a big GPU for not that much faster than Renoir.
Right.
Anyways.
But moving on with this one, let's actually, if we can, go right down at the bottom, right? You've said Intel will dissolve XE, right?
Yeah. Oh, and I think a lot of people got confused what that meant.
Yeah, because this is... I've also been getting people sending me private messages over this article saying, people who have their own sources, and a lot of them are saying, like, there is no way that Intel are going to dissolve the graphics division.
I probably should have said that graphics division,
Yes.
not the
Yes.
graphics division.
You should have said
I didn't mean the whole graphics. Obviously, the thing what you have to understand about XE is that that's more of a branding thing. Gen 12 is the successor to Gen 11, but when they call like the higher end Gen 12 GPUs with the XE branding, that's not really the same thing. It's a very different architecture. That's kind of like the Raja Kaduri's doing. I'm not sure what they were going to call Arctic Sound before the XE thing happened. I don't know if they would have called it Gen 12, and I don't think they would have. But all the integrated stuff is going to stay. All the Tiger Lake XE graphics that are called DG1 in the discrete form, the discrete form, I don't know if that was ever planned. I don't think it was. But before Raja Kaduri even came on the scene, the 96 EU GPU was already planned. They were already developing it. That they're not canceling the integrated stuff.
I know that we don't like going back to articles and like changing stuff, but maybe like just even adding XE in brackets before this would help to like. We also don't want the wrong information being out there.
Yeah.
Well, you can put like in the brackets edit or something like that to mark that it was a change that was made after posting, just for clarification.
I mean, you can see what Matthew's done, yeah? He's actually said the title, the heading here is Intel will dissolve XE, but then gone on to say that, XE will be cancelled and dissolve the graphics division.
Well, in my head, it's like when you say something like that, usually it's referring to what you're referring to before.
Yes.
But
this is why I keep having these chats about being explicit with wording, because I was under the same impression, because even though we both had this source, I mean, we both like talked to this source in the past, and we both know that this is an extremely good source.
Yes.
I was reading this and thinking, there is no freaking way that Intel are going to dissolve their graphics division. I mean, they need the integrated graphics, and they even need their GPU. But yeah, essentially, what's happening is XE, it's going to run to DG2, and then that's it. It's done.
And Ponte Vecchio.
And Ponte Vecchio, yeah. We're not going to even see this DG3, which is a kind of confirmation of something. Might have been this or another source told us some time ago. But that was part of that. Basically, XE dying out around 2023 has gone the same way as Larrabee, like you said. And they're going to have to try again. I don't know what they're going to do. Don't know what the guy's going to be. I mean, the information you got is that Raja will be leaving. And this is another thing that a lot of people started to question. I mean, here's the thing. We've been getting told all year that Raja would be leaving Intel. But the assumption was that he was going to get booted out because Murthy would win this whole politics thing that was going on. But in the end, Murthy, he was always going to live and die on the success or failure of 7 nanometers. And that's why he got kicked, because 7 nanometers has failed. He has failed at 7. That's left Raja there. And again, I really feel that I need to say that from what I know, my limited knowledge of it is Raja, you can't really blame him for all of this XE stuff. I mean, he wasn't even there when it started. He made changes that maybe didn't make sense. So you can blame him for that. Raja leaves Intel. Who's left? I mean, who else is going to go?
That's what I was wondering.
I mean, they've already basically got rid of Ari, who was there before. So, I mean, who's left? Where are all these world-class graphics engineers who would want to go to Intel? I mean, Intel are way below even Radeon Technologies Group when it comes to this stuff. Everybody wants to be at NVIDIA because NVIDIA are clearly the leader. Maybe Raja ends up there. I don't know if Raja's going to end up at NVIDIA or not, but it's an interesting one to think about. I wouldn't imagine so.
I think he'll try.
You think he'll try?
Yeah.
I think this whole dissolving XE, it kind of points out a direction that Intel is trying to start going. Maybe Bob Swan's leading this. I don't know. But we've always seen in the past where Intel will try something like phones, CPUs, or something like that, and just run negative on it. $1 billion negative.
Contra revenue.
Trying to get this into production and just fell miserably. I think they're kind of cutting XE off before it hits that 1 billion mark, right? Because they're already 500 million into it, and it's not going to take off for anything. It's going to be well behind any of the other technology that's out there. And so they're just cutting it off.
Killing it, basically killing it. Yeah.
Putting DG1 on in a discrete form, those graphics that already exist, putting it on its own card costed like several millions. Like that alone was quite a chunk of change.
Well, let's say Swan's doing the right thing here. He's just decided, right, we're not even going to pursue this any further. We're going to, DG2 will come out and then it's canned after that. Right now is when Intel needs to be thinking about their next architecture, their next like graphics architecture, yeah? Not like at that point. And they're going to need a guy in there to run this whole show. Who is this guy? If it's not Raja, then who is it? This is why I'm just not convinced that Raja is going to get fired from Intel, but perhaps he's going to leave of his own accord.
Yeah, that's the impression that I got.
Yeah.
Because he needs to stay for just a little bit longer to get away from Murthy's reputation. And he needs to stay there just to make himself look good enough. But then he needs to leave really quickly to get away from what's about to happen with Arctic Sounds.
The best way for Raja to do that would be wait until Tiger Lake launches and people will be really impressed by the integrated graphics performance, and then Raja can take the credit for that and walk away. I mean, that could be what happens.
Well, Tiger Lake is supposed to launch like in September.
Yeah.
So I imagine that's why he's going to be leaving within Q3 or 5 weeks or whatever.
But where do you think he's going to go?
I think NVIDIA.
Well, that was the thing. I mean, Matthew thinks NVIDIA. I don't know if NVIDIA needs him. I mean,
well, it's
I
like
just
another
don't know.
thing. Like NVIDIA also has a similar problem. It's like everyone knows about Jensen Huang, a legendary engineer. But can you name another engineer at NVIDIA?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there's not a whole lot of legendary GPU engineers around, period. Never mind like at NVIDIA.
Yeah, there's no Jim Keller of the GPUs, right?
Not really. I mean, not really. I mean, you would have said David Wang was kind of, I guess.
I would say Jensen is.
Yeah. I mean, NVIDIA have got like lots and lots of very, very good engineers, for sure. That's why they're doing so well in graphics, yeah?
I'm not sure if the corporate culture at NVIDIA would allow any of their individual engineers to shine. Maybe Jensen wants to take all the credit. I don't know.
Perhaps, yeah.
But I don't believe in engineer superstars. I think teams are more powerful than engineers, because no matter how good you are, there are always going to be spots in the technology where you have shadows and you don't exactly own the field. So a team of 5, 7, 10 people, good people, will always outshine. So I think maybe NVIDIA's success is exactly because they don't have a superstar there.
You could be right with that. I do think you need somebody with a vision, though. And here's the thing. You could look at Raja and say, Raja has actually got some pretty decent vision. If you consider stuff like, if you look at all the good stuff in Vega, or all the forward-looking stuff in Vega, like the high bandwidth cache controller and all that kind of thing, presumably this was Raja's idea. Maybe the implementation.
Vega was good in the integrated graphics.
Yeah, there was that. It was just a massive power hog, not very fast. But there's some pretty neat technologies in there as well, including a lot of stuff that was broken and didn't see the light of day. Worth thinking about, I guess. I think the last thing to talk about in this one, though, is Aurora dropping Ponte Vecchio.
Yeah, it's not confirmed, but it's highly likely.
Highly likely.
Yes, because they have leeway.
I mean, there's probably room here for Intel to be sued if they can't provide this, or... Well,
they can just terminate the contract. I don't think
who can terminate the contract? Or,
Argonne National
right.
I almost said library. Laboratory.
I mean, we're just going to have to wait and see on this one.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why like Enterprise and stuff likes to see fulfilled roadmaps for whatever they're trying to get.
Yeah.
And I think maybe Intel almost probably took a loss trying to sell Ponte Vecchio to the National Lab in order to win this particular contract.
Absolutely.
And so they probably rolled a risk on it just in the event that, well, it was super cheap compared to alternatives just to get that extra compute.
If it wasn't for human malware, I think this already would have happened, because they can mask a delay and blame it on human malware. But Argonne knows it's like, well, is it that small of a delay? So they're keeping them right now to make it look like that they can only be convinced by like decent price or really good technology from AMD or NVIDIA.
I mean, here's the thing. If Argonne have gone with Intel here based on an Intel GPU roadmap, then heads need to roll there as far as I'm concerned, Argonne National Laboratory, because...
Depends on how much money they were saving.
Yeah.
Charlie from Semi-Accurate wrote an article about Ponte Vecchio, and he said it didn't tape out in time, and he said heads rolled. Literally, he said heads rolled.
Heads rolled, yeah.
Yep.
The heads need to roll for stuff like that.
Well, especially if you've already got a winning contract, right?
Yeah. And this whole thing about Intel and roadmaps maybe not coming to fruition and... well, let's just say that the whole 7nm thing has kicked off in other ways that they were perhaps not anticipating, or maybe they were. But apparently, this Hagens Berman, or is it Hagens Berman? National trial attorneys, they are now going to be investigating possible securities fraud based on this whole 7nm thing. And just looking at their website, it's all about an investigation centering on whether Intel misrepresented and concealed manufacturing and performance issues with its next generation 7nm chips. And it then goes on to basically goes over some of the stuff that I talked about in my video, where they kept on saying, like, we've made time to market a priority, and they repeatedly affirmed the 7nm chips timetable. This was a big shock to all of us, really. And I remember telling you, Matthew, about it in the private message, but I just wasn't completely sure whether or not to go with it. And then, and my thinking was, well, there's going to be plenty of time anyway. It's not like Intel are just going to come out and admit this. I was thinking, like, this is going to be months before Intel admits it. And then what happens? The second quarter financial conference, Bob Swan comes out and says, 7nm is a disaster. I've completely messed it up. And then Murthy's gone a few days later. I had to laugh at this, by the way, when Stacey Raskin, the analyst from Bernstein, he called the news of the 7nm delay the worst we have seen in our career covering the company. So this is like Stacey, who's like a financial analyst, is all of Intel's and all of AMD's, NVIDIA's, like their conference calls. But he concluded with, whatever little credibility they had is out of the window. I mean, that is some pretty harsh words.
Telling everyone that 7nm is 6 months more delayed or whatever, how is that the worst when 10nm has been delayed multiple times?
Because it's on a nice edge. Because they know, Intel can skip 10 and they can still come back with a 7nm just in time to head off AMD. A 6 month delay, or really it's a 12-month delay, because the yields are 12-month delay.
They were already delayed.
Yeah, because they were already delayed. It was that close. People realized how close it was for Intel.
And how many guys like me have said, this is Intel's last chance saloon, 7nm. If they mess this up, then they could be on the way out. And that was a shocking thing for me, because I had completely prepared myself for Intel making a decent comeback at 7.
Yeah, same. Because we had our big leak in October of last year where they were like focused solely on 7nm.
Yeah. Everything was behind it. Everything that you heard from Murthy, everything you heard from Bob Swan, it was all the same. It's like, 7's coming along nicely. We're really confident. And it's going to be a good node. And then they start comparing it to TSMC's 5nm, saying, we're on par with TSMC's 5, maybe even better. And then bombshell. Oh, look, guys, we managed to mess up 7nm yet again, and it's a year out, a year further out than what we thought.
TSMC is already churning out 5nm chips as we speak.
Yeah.
And 7 isn't even off the ground yet. So by the time it actually makes it, it's not going to be a big deal. Maybe that's why we've even started hearing some about Intel's 5nm stuff.
Yeah. It probably is, just deflect a little bit more. But the thing here is, I mean, apparently some women paid, what was it, $300,000 or bought $300,000 worth of Intel stock the day before the second quarter conference call. And obviously she's pretty unhappy to see, 50 grand wiped off of that just overnight because this news on 7nm wasn't actually made public. Here's the thing. When do you make something like this public? Should you do it immediately? Yeah. Should you come out and say 7's a disaster?
according to this class action lawsuit, they probably should. That's because somebody somewhere is going to cry foul.
They need some kind of leeway, though, right? There's got to be some leeway where they have a look at what's gone wrong and say, is this something that sets us back a month? Is it something that sets us back 6 months? Or is it even worse than that? So, I mean, Intel does have some kind of leeway there where they will say, we had to analyze this fully before we then come out and say it, because you see what happens. It's like you said, like the stock price capitulated overnight, because this is how important these things are.
And if you read into what Bob Swan actually said, he said that they identified a defect mode in the 7 nanometer that caused a yield degradation. Yeah. And so maybe they are doing exactly that. They recently found a problem, a defect in the node, who knows, but they've identified a defect, investigated, and maybe even started correcting. I mean, as it says, as a result, Intel has invested in quote-unquote contingency plans, including outsourcing, in order to work around this issue. And so they're probably disclosing this at their conference call within that 3-month window between conference calls, right? Because they do this on every quarter. And maybe they hadn't identified this at the last one.
That's the thing. So the whole case maybe revolves around when they realize that they have an issue. Did they know that before March?
Yeah, which is where discovery would come in.
It's a year delay, though. Like they said that their yield target was 12 months behind.
Yeah.
How does that happen within 3 months?
No, I mean, but if they noticed the severe issue recently, and now they looked at this and said, wow, this will delay us by 1 year.
No, it's that their current yields are a year behind target.
Well, they were 6 months behind. Now they're a year. This defect mode caused a 6-month delay.
What's happened is that when 7 nanometers launches, it will probably, assuming like they don't have like some miraculous breakthrough that gets them back on track. Mm-hmm. That when 7 nanometer launches, their yields will be one full year premature. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, not a full year, or half a year.
You remember that slide that I keep on bringing up, which shows what happened at 14 nanometers compared to 22? Yeah, 22. You see like the yellow line for 22, and then it takes a little dip at a certain part of the process where the process is yielding very early on, but then it rises and it pretty much goes to like a sort of flat line where the yield just very slowly improves over time. But 14, take a dip, then it recovers a little bit, and then it takes a massive dip, and then it takes another dip. And this is what's happening with 10, yeah? At the start of the process, they're up at a certain point, and they think, yeah, things are going well here. Now, I would probably talk about this more in the main video that I said I was going to do, but what might be happening here is, or what I thought originally was, they've now introduced EUV, like certain layers of EUV, and this is probably what's caused the yield to take a massive drop, just like what we saw with 14, except possibly even further, because like a year out, a year delay is a long, long time. So I think that's probably what's happened here. It started off, and they've been at a certain point where they've thought, yep, things are going well. It's almost like they haven't paid attention to history, what happened at 14, what's happened to them at 10, because they say the same thing over and over. Yeah, it's going well. Yeah, things are great. This is fine. Nothing to see here. And then all of a sudden it's like, Christ, their yields have fallen apart just like that. And it's happened in 14, it's happened in 10, and it's happened in 7 now.
Well, and I think that's something that a lot of people miss, is because they sit here and look at 14, plus, and think that it's always been a great node for them. And it wasn't. It was delayed. It was terrible at the beginning. Yeah. And it's eventually, over time, improved a significant amount. So now it's their bread and butter. But yeah, it was also running into these same problems when it was coming out. So that's 3 nodes now in a row that have been severely hampered and delayed.
And for me, it's all gone the exact same way. It started off looking like it's all right, and then a couple of months later, they've realized, oh shit, we've got something really, really bad happening here to the yield. Whether it's due to them going with EUV or something else. Well, there is actually a theory. Now, there's an even better theory, not actually EUV, but retired engineer over on Twitter, Chia, he found this. It was a post by a former Intel employee. It's in Chinese or Taiwanese or whatever. Well, actually, I'll start this one talking about what we just talked about with this whole lawsuit thing, the securities fraud thing, because this just kind of proves what I'm talking about. This guy who works for Intel or used to work for Intel says that everybody's asking just what happened to Intel and this 7-nanometer delay and TSMC outsourcing. But this is not news to people within Intel's manufacturing group where this guy works, yeah? He's saying that it's been in the works for a long time. It's just that this is the first time an announcement like this has been made. It comes as a shock to people, including myself, but it wasn't a shock. This 7-nanometer delay was not a shock to those people inside. Now, this is really interesting, and I will talk about it more in depth. But apparently, Intel have attempted gate-all-around FET. Was it GAFET they call it? Gate-all-around FETs, which is like the next stage of FinFETs. And obviously, Intel were first to FinFETs on, was it 22 they went FinFETs? Yeah, it was. It was 22 when Intel first went to FinFETs from the planar. And so this is the next stage in this. It's gate-all-around. And there's another stage as well. Samsung have got their own thing called MBC FET, which is instead of these nano wires, it's what they call nano sheets, so you can really drive the current through even better. This could be a big advantage for Samsung actually, but that's another topic. But anyway, Intel have attempted gate-all-around and they've failed to do it. And this may be what has caused them this delay. As far as a year? Yeah, easily. If they've just not been able to quite get this off the ground, it makes you wonder though why they thought they were doing all right to start with, but now all of a sudden yield has just it's just dropped like a stone. And well, from what retired engineer says, they basically ditched it. They've ditched this whole idea of the gate-all-around, and they're just going to be sticking with like FinFETs and EUV. There's another thing to talk about this because they've had this disaster at 14, like we just talked about. They've had this ongoing disaster at 10. Where they apparently are too aggressive with their shrink. Their 2.7x shrink is what caused that. And so now they've gone and tried gate-all-around at 7 nanometers and they've had basically yet another disaster. I mean, what is wrong with them just trying to maybe not jump ahead? I think this is a problem that they're having here. They're trying to jump ahead, but they're really struggling to do even the basics, and they're not doing that well, I guess, anymore. And it's almost like they're just so desperate to get ahead of TSMC, but it's just not happening. And from what I've been told, TSMC will be bringing gate-all-around at 3 nanometers, and they've already got they've got it working at 7, or was it 5? But they're not yet using it in manufacturing. So that was interesting from that perspective. Well, two perspectives there. This whole thing about Intel knowing all about the delay long before they said it, long before they told anybody about it, and also the reason for it being this whole gate-all-around nanowire thing that just hasn't quite worked for them.
Well, it's a sad story.
I think it kind of goes back to the XE thing. Do you think Intel might be considering spinning out its fabs like GlowFlow?
I don't think they will. There's a lot of stories going on about it, like what they're going to do. They're going to outsource to TSMC. TSMC doesn't have the capacity. Lisa Su just said that they don't have the capacity. If AMD doesn't have the capacity with chiplets, what chance has TSMC got of providing Intel with anywhere near the type of capacity they need? Intel has got the manufacturing group. They need to sort it out, and they just need to do something simple. They can't have any more disasters. They just can't afford it.
Well, if they just go for parity as opposed to being an industry leader, I think they would probably do a little better.
I don't think they can even get to parity anymore. They'll always be lagging just that little bit. But that's not a disaster to Intel.
No, because they own all the fabs.
The problem with Intel, their disaster is the fact that it can't yield.
Yeah.
Because they need, even a terrible process.
They needed chiplets 5 years ago.
Yeah, they did. And whether or not they've even got that coming, well.
It's incredible that they haven't even seemed to have thought of chiplets. Why aren't they doing it? Why aren't they just doing what AMD does?
I think the whole Infinity Fabric thing's not that easy to pull off. And
maybe not.
It's definitely not that. That is a engineering marvel as far as I'm concerned. I just wonder if Intel still has that kind of expertise or if they've bled so much talent. I don't really want to talk about this whole diversity thing again. Which
Do we want to talk about something happier instead?
Yeah, why not? We'll move on to the final topic of this one. Another tweet by Cybercat, who says DDR5 is looking good. And they would like to know what particular 64-core system this DDR5 was tested on.
Or extrapolated.
Yeah. This was interesting simply because we now have evidence of DDR5 working on a 64-core system. And obviously, for a while now, there's been some debate about whether or not Milan might have DDR5 capability. And obviously, I'm the one who's been saying stuff about it's only an I/O die. If you've got an I/O die, the chiplets can connect to that, and the I/O die connects to the DDR. It could also be Genoa, though, the next one. But I would have thought that that's pretty far out.
I don't think it's taped out yet.
Look at the gigabytes per second.
Yeah.
They're doing increments based on the RAM speed. It looks like about 18 or so per step. And it looks fairly consistent with a little bit of tapering off near the end, 6,000, 6,400, where it goes to about 10 per step. But I guarantee they just took that number, divided it by 64, and came out with this number in their chart.
Oh, so you don't think they've actually got a 64-core CPU?
No, I think they probably included 64 because there's Epic systems out there with 64 cores. So they probably made their chart with these numbers so that you can see how many gigs per second each core is going to get in a 64-core environment. But I don't think they actually physically test. No, I don't think so.
I think it's extrapolated. I agree with that.
I guarantee it's just a division of this single column here of gigs per second.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't actually consider that, but yeah, you could be right. Interesting bit of spelling on this slide here. Utilization as well.
Wait, where's that? Oh,
the blue one. Utilization. Now, this is the one I was looking at, and you can see that right at the end, 64 cores have got each per core, the bandwidth is 4.66 gigabytes per second. Yeah, which is basically just this number here, this 298.8.2 divided by 64. So it'd be interesting to see just exactly how that scales, because it'll probably tell you if you're right or not, if that's like scaling extremely well.
You could just punch it through a calculator.
Yeah, probably could do, yeah.
But I think it is worth considering whether or not they actually did test this with an actual CPU. I don't think they did, but there is apparently a version of Milan with an I/O die that allows for DDR5, apparently.
Is this Trento one now?
Trento is either Genoa successor or something else. But I've heard this referred to as Milan HPC.
Oh, yeah. But actually, I was told that Milan HPC may actually be Trento. So that's probably where I'm getting that from.
Really? Yeah. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah. Good source, that one. So it could well be the case as well.
Then maybe Turin is the Genoa successor? Who knows? There's a million Italian cities that we haven't talked about.
I thought that was interesting anyway. You're probably right. It's just been extrapolated, but it's always nice to think about, and it's always nice to see that. Oh, even with Intel, I mean, even they are now moving to DDR5 sooner rather than later.
Do you want to do questions?
Yeah, let's move on to the final part of it, questions and answers.
So we have the first question from Shampooless. What's the general opinion of all the major tech developers having a game of chicken this year? NVIDIA, AMD, Sony, Microsoft, all going, no, you go first, silly.
I don't like it. I want my new tech now.
Right? Just tell us.
I think NVIDIA knows that they've won already, and I think that Microsoft know that they've won the console as well.
Well, don't count out Sony yet. They have won pretty much every single time. Somehow.
I'm just thinking it might end up being a closer run this time.
Yeah.
Because Sony's always been, double of what Microsoft's been put out with the Xbox.
Not during PlayStation 3. PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
Because that was a bit of a disaster.
Sony pulled up near the end, but at the beginning, Microsoft was a fair bit ahead. So it ended up being fairly even at the end of that generation.
How much does technology really count in the console war? How much is the titles?
I think it's the games that matter more.
Oh, yeah. Definitely the games.
That's another thing, because I think that Microsoft are probably doing better than expected in terms of the game list.
That is true. They have the better backwards compatibility. Sony has vastly inferior backwards compatibility. If people care about that, then that'll be a big deal for Microsoft.
And apparently Microsoft have also got a bit more like 120 or 120 FPS games as well already. Yeah. So, I mean, it's still early days. The console chips are shipping though. That's why AMD are going to be making $2.5 billion in the third quarter, yeah, because they're expecting a huge amount of sales coming from both. So, yeah, it's getting to that stage now where we probably don't have that much longer to wait. What I have noticed is, maybe this is just my Twitter feed, but a lot of developers seem to be a bit more behind Microsoft as well than I expected to see. I mean, when it comes to the game consoles, I don't really care. Yeah, I just don't care who wins it or anything like that. I think Microsoft and Sony, yeah, I just don't care. But from what I can tell, Microsoft have just seemed to be doing everything better. This time around, at least, Microsoft just seem to be doing everything better. And I'm not going to write Sony off yet, but yeah, let's wait and see.
I think that it might be that this human malware thing we are going through might actually boost the console sales, because all those bored people staying at home and having the helicopter money thrown at them. So
that's a good idea.
Animal Crossing, the new Animal Crossing game has sold insanely well. Like it's top charts for a very long time.
It might be a better year at AMD when they...
It's done uncharacteristically well, and that launched right at the beginning of the lockdown.
Yes, and it was a stay-at-home game, so yeah, of course it's going to go really well. I think the biggest thing that it's going to do is all of the people that haven't ever really tried playing games probably tried during this whole stay-at-home thing, and
first-time buyers.
So they might have a larger gaming community now, especially for sit down and play console kind of community, because there has always been a large group of people that played mobile only, right? They'd play either Sudoku or some stupid little Tetris or something on their phone, and maybe they won a few people over into the consoles. How many people may have sat down and bought a PlayStation or an Xbox because they are stuck at home?
Just wanted to add that it might turn out to be, if this happens really, better year at AMD than they actually ever dreamt of.
Oh yeah, and one other thing about AMD, I just think RDNA isn't on time to be on equal footing with Ampere in terms of launch date, because Lisa Su keeps reiterating late this year for RDNA 2. That's probably not September or even.
We're expecting Ampere next month, yeah.
Yeah.
They've already incorporated RDNA 2 into the consoles, so one has to wonder what it is that's delaying it.
Capacity?
Yeah, maybe. Their capacity has never really been a big thing, though, because they haven't really sold a whole lot.
It's been a significant issue for AMD. But I think another thing you have to consider is that the RDNA 2 in the consoles might not be totally the same as the RDNA 2 in the desktop GPUs. They might have taped out the desktop GPUs later than the console APUs.
Could be. Maybe they had to add something or fix something.
Like Microsoft and Sony are obviously giving AMD money to help them along with the research in their console APUs. So it doesn't. It's not unfeasible that Big Navi is lagging behind because the consoles had so much more priority.
And and just talking about that, I mean, all of AMD's products really are at TSMC now, absolutely everything. And these game consoles are really taking up a lot of that wafer allocation. Whereas NVIDIA, they're doing the A100 at TSMC, they might be doing something else there. And we know that they're going to be doing their Ampere gaming cards at Samsung, including on an advanced Samsung node. So they're able to split these cards out, and they're going to be dictating how the next generation goes, I think.
Oh, I just want to say this a little bit off tangent, but apparently there's the chance that there's another die on the Xbox system that's not the GPU. I'm sorry, not the APU. But if you look closely at like the schematics that Xbox provides, you never get a full look at all of the boards in there. And second, in one of the diagrams they have, like, and this is kind of part of the marketing, so this might be a little bit like not entirely a die, but like some nonsense they've cooked up. But you can see one of the diagrams shows like data links going from the APU to another board to something that's not shown on the board because like the APU board is on top of the other board that the data links are going to. So it's like obscured. So there might be another. So there might be another die on there that's taking up even more capacity.
That's interesting. Right, but anyway, moving on to the next question.
So Carbon Cry, he asks, since Kirk is now a proven weeb, can we include his waifu body pillow in his lumbar support reviews going forward? Now, I will admit I do have a body pillow that I bought on Black Friday a couple of years back. But it is not a waifu body pillow because those aren't very comfortable.
Oh.
They're for decoration.
But they definitely help with your lower back while sleeping so that you don't like cross your knees if you sleep on your side like I like to. I don't sleep on my back. That's terrible. I don't sleep on my face. That's terrible. I sleep on my side.
Who can possibly sleep on their back?
People that like to swallow their tongue all night.
I can sleep anyway, back, side, or...
I can almost sleep standing up, all right? I don't have any problems sleeping whatsoever. My wife ridicules me all the time. She's so jealous because she doesn't get great sleep all the time. And so she's like, you can sleep for 12 hours and I can poke you and prod you and you still won't even wake up. So that brings the waifu part into it. Okay.
Well, I never really got this whole thing, to be honest, this whole like anime type thing. It's more and more popular, but I just never really did it for me.
It's after your time.
It's not really after my time, though. I mean, Jenny's into it. Like my partner, Jenny, she's been watching like Bleach and whatnot since, I don't know, the 90s.
That's a little older.
Yeah.
It's a different.
I mean, it's not like it's a new thing or anything like that. But what I will say this though is, I was having a look through games on Steam, and something caught my eye. I'm like, well, that looks interesting.
Oh no,
Dragon Ball Xenoverse?
No. It's
Kakarot Edition?
Slightly more X-rated than that.
Oh.
What's it called? Is it Senran Kagura? I bet it's
I'm not exactly sure. I couldn't remember what it was, but I mean, look, I'm a guy, yeah, so this catches my eye, obviously, and I click on it. Never ever do that, by the way, because now all of my recommendations full of this bloody hentai type anime stuff. Like,
wait, that reminds me. Okay, so I like visual novels. I like the anime visual novels sometimes. Like they're kind of like, I don't know, I just like reading shit. And I heard of this one. I saw Game Grumps play this one called Secure Spirit, and I didn't really watch much of it. I watched like maybe the first few minutes. I was like, oh, that looks like an interesting visual novel. And I bought it, and it's like softcore hentai. And I was like, God damn it. I got bamboozled.
I mean, what else?
Make sure to provide a list of names so that all of the weebs in hiding can go and purchase these little titles.
I should have watched more in the first few minutes. When I watched the rest of the Game Grumps thing, I was like, oh yeah, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, so now every time I look at my Steam recommended list, I get these flashing up and I'm clicking not interested.
The learning algorithm doesn't work.
Yeah.
Before opening your Steam store, you always look over your shoulder, don't you?
Yeah. Make sure nobody else is watching the screen.
Well, I have no visual novels on mine somehow. How the heck does that work? You just click one?
So, with anime, it's a little different than, if you like anime, you don't like all anime just automatically.
There's a lot of different anime.
Yeah, and it has a wide variety, just like sitcom TV on American broadcast television. You have all these different things, and you may have interests in some and not others. You can like sitcoms in general, but you might dislike specific ones or even most of them except for the one you like to watch. And the same goes with anime. There is such a wide variety of anime and what that anime tries to talk about. Like Dragon Ball Z is definitely not hentai anime. They have different classifications.
Wait, I just want to say one last thing. On the old Xbox 360 Netflix app, if you Googled hentai, if you searched for hentai, it would show you anime. I'm not joking. hentai was a keyword on Netflix. It didn't show you actual hentai. It just brought you the anime stuff.
Yeah. But, hentai, shonen, they're all different styles of anime, different goals that they're trying to accomplish, because over there they animate a lot of stuff, and a lot of people like to watch the animated content, and it can cover anything from very deep, serious topics of mental illness and psychological, just crazy stuff. It can be murder mystery. It could be fun child shows.
Kirk, we get it. You're a weeb.
Yeah, we get it. Yeah.
I watch anime. I don't overwatch anime. There is a difference.
But do you play Overwatch?
No, actually, I don't play Overwatch.
Do we have any more questions? Do we have any more questions?
Yes, we have more. Nick asks, what game or genre has pushed our technology the most?
Someone in the emojis put Crisis. That's probably true.
It's been a benchmark, can it play Crisis? Well,
I would say Crisis. I would say probably like the first-person shooter genre. Like I talked about this I think in the last podcast. Half-Life 2. That game still looks incredible to me. It still looks really good. Like the facial animation is really on point.
It's better than Andromeda. Yeah.
But it's like any
My
game
face
from
is
that
tired.
year. Any other game from that year doesn't look nearly as good if we're considering the games that try to look realistic.
Okay, I'll agree with that comment, but I still don't think Half-Life 2 still looks good.
No, I think it does.
Maybe the skybox? Maybe?
I think if you consider it's 2004, it's still pretty amazing.
The textures,
yes, that's why I'll agree with that.
Are low resolution, yes. But if you just get past that, it still looks incredible.
It almost looks like one of the original Tomb Raiders with having some jaggies, some obvious angles to it. Like I've seen it.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
No, it's not like the original Tomb Raider. No, where it's like 3 triangle. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But I don't think it looks that good. It hasn't really aged terribly well, but for its time, it looked really good.
I mean, I would say something like World of Warcraft, obviously, because I am an MMO player, and obviously, I mean, that must have done wonders for like the whole infrastructure of like the whole multiplayer thing.
Yeah, I think it did a phenomenal job, at least internally for Blizzard, on server architecture and designing a game server that could handle that many players, that many logon attempts at a time, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If we're talking about multiplayer, we should also talk about Quake, because Quake was super important.
Quake was a very definitive title, yes.
I'm talking about for the technology, because the technology they used for multiplayer specifically, it's what we still use today. Like the thing where because the problem back then was, how do you get different people with different pings to the server to all play in a game? And they use technologies like guessing, like I guess like speculative technologies, trying to like do the work before they have to, and that kind of stuff. I'm sure it's gotten better, but that was like a big step forward. That was a big leap forward for multiplayer games.
Well, that was the big thing about RTS as well, is you could path your people by just clicking on a location. The path gets computed on your side. The target gets put up to the server. And so out of that entire walk path, the only thing that they needed to transmit was the destination.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. That kind of stuff too, where it's like the server doesn't ask that much. The server isn't computing that much.
Yeah.
The server is relying on the player's hardware as well. And it only like kind of verifies.
Yeah, and that's why you could have 20 or 30 people on dial-up playing Quake.
Yeah.
And
so it wasn't perfect, but it worked way better than anything else.
Yeah, and it was almost the go-to shooter on the web at the time.
Yeah. Probably because of that infrastructure behind it. I mean, that's another thing, because, had it been a lag fest, then people just wouldn't have played it. And there were plenty of games around that time, that were lag fest, depending on how bad your personal connection was.
But you want to know what's probably also driven the technology by a phenomenal degree?
Anime?
Porn.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. It has done. In terms of bandwidth, at least, for sure.
I mean, streaming video And I'm pretty sure Netflix isn't going to claim the top crown for streaming video, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It has pushed the need to have storage, bandwidth, and any number of things like that. It's really pushed the industry forward.
Also on the privacy side.
I mean, this is an actual fact, yeah, because I mean, I've read articles on it, and like pornography is one of the major drivers of technology, especially web technology as well.
I just imagine back in the 90s, some like Comcast CEO is waiting way too long for an image to come up. And he's like,
well,
this porn isn't fast enough.
Yeah, and here's the thing is VR headsets, you think that games is the killer app for it? You think that Beat Saber is the killer app for it? No, point of view porn is probably the killer app for that. And probably I bet you they have sold more point of view porn than Beat Saber.
Probably has done.
Of course, Beat Saber is kind of an adjacent fitting name, but still. Aurelian, you had a comment. We cut you off.
Oh, you can't get away with that one, sure.
Oh, no.
Well, I can add this from a personal experience that, well, okay, before that, we also know that the video war was VHS versus Beta was also won due to porn. But yeah, Betamax, yeah. But I have also a personal experience with that. So before, in my early working life. No, well, in a way, professional, let's call it that way, professional experience. In my earlier life, I was part of a small startup doing video on demand and real-time transcoding. And guess who were our first customers? Hotel chains, which were kind of, what was the main content of the video on demand was porn.
Yeah.
And I remember we were sometimes analyzing the quality of the transcoding, watching some sequence there. Let's say the pixelation had to be kept to a minimum. So it was 10 guys in a lab looking close at the...
That doesn't sound like the worst job ever.
You know what? The pixelation bad enough it looked censored, right?
Yeah, well, which you didn't want to then. So yeah, it is. Porn is definitely a technology driver in anywhere, anything it touches.
And on that, we will move on to the next question.
That's the truthful answer, not the glossed over point of view from a hardcore gamer kind of thing. That's the truthful system administrator in me there, seeing actually the cause. All right, FCM question. What will be the medium and long-term impact of the leadership reshuffle at Intel, especially the new head of fabs who appears to have down-in-the-trenches experience as a plant and fab manager?
I think they're going to have to give up on XPU. I think they're going to have to give that up. Because, like, with XE going to get the axe, like, I mean, they'll still have the IP, but what are they going to be making with that? Integrated graphics.
But we're talking about what was her name again that took over the job for the manufacturing?
Kelleher, yeah,
of course. If she was that good, why was she not doing it before? That's what I want to know.
'Cause somebody else was in the position?
Somebody else was doing it instead. Well, I guess we'll wait and see.
I mean, she has the potential of doing what Lisa kind of did, because she has that down in the trenches kind of mentality as well, that experience. Yeah. And she's done a phenomenal job bringing AMD to the forefront. And I think we might see some of that from Kelleher.
Well, I mean, I think that's a better question, is that a question of it's better to have the engineer there, or is it better to have the business person there? The thing about Bob Swan is he must know by now that Intel is just an ongoing shit show, and it must be because there's just too much emphasis on the marketing and business side of things and not enough emphasis on the engineering side. So AMD can tell that, yeah? AMD can see that by now. So Bob Swan must be the same, even though Bob Swan's a purely business type guy. He must know that they need real engineers there. Obviously, he's going to want to keep the top job, but everywhere else, get some engineers in and see if we can, at least bring Intel back to the fore. It's funny. I had a private message on Twitter. I'm not going to tell you who it's from because you won't believe it.
Bob
if I did tell you. No, it wasn't Bob Swan. No, from an actual engineer, an ex-Intel engineer who told me that Bob Swan is now looking to take back or bring back a lot of the engineers that they lost over the previous 4 or 5 years. And if that's true, then with a bit of luck, it's going to take another 3, 4, 5 years, sadly, before we see the fruits of it. And this is one of the biggest problems Nobody gets that amount of time. Yeah, you look at Raja, he's not going to get that time probably. So, I don't know. I mean, what do you do if you're Intel CEO?
Stop outsourcing everything to contractors and actually hire real people that have a vested stake in the company.
Yeah, that'd be a good start. Yeah.
Lower ambitions and expectations.
Have a hard look at your diversity quotas, stuff like that. And
hire people that are qualified, not just because they tick a box.
I feel like people are overstating the whole diversity thing. I don't think that's the main issue.
I think it's rampant at Intel. I really do.
Really?
And not just Intel, yeah. I think it's just one of those things that tends to take over a lot of companies of a certain size. I mean, they seem rather preoccupied with this whole thing. Even today, I got an email today about Intel.
It makes them money
it's a
to talk
PR
about
thing.
It.
Yeah, it's pure PR. Yeah. But also, I am still hearing from like old engineers, old and new, about how things are going, especially in the manufacturing side of things. I just don't think manufacturing in particular is something that can be filled by a diversity quota. I just don't think it can be. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're going the way they're going. But if Bob Swan is now going to bring back a lot of the older guys, a lot of the guys that they got rid of or who left for whatever reason, and a lot of people left because they really didn't like Murphy, and they had this whole act thing, Intel, where they, it was basically get rid of a bunch of 12,000 people. They got rid of at one point.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. If he brings them back, if he's willing to bring the engineers back and hold up his hand and say we need the engineering talent there, above all else, then maybe they've got a chance at a comeback by 2025. Let's call it. Being generous.
Then there were also those reports about the toxic company culture that it was reported a few months ago with the blue badges and the green badges and all that. It can't help.
No.
If you have second-class citizens.
In that you had a contractor saying they just literally surfed the web all day.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll probably get that to some degree with a open, lax culture for real employees, but somebody who is actually on the payroll might actually consider doing their job a little bit harder.
The thing is, this person wanted to do stuff, but he wasn't allowed to, because basically hands tied based on the fact that they were contractors rather than full employees, and they had to go to certain people before anything got done. It's like I said, it's like, a ticket system. I get sent a ticket and I can deal with that ticket, and I can't do anything else. I can't even think for myself apart from, what this ticket tells me next.
That's a management issue. That's an issue where and that's also probably pay these people less and then have them do nothing issue where you're saving a penny and spending $1.
But they're contractors. Normally contractors aren't necessarily paid less than an actual employee. They can just fire them on the spot if they don't like what they're doing. And
That's
I
the main
think
reason.
that is what they're buying.
Much less benefits. Much less in benefits is what it was.
I don't think that leverage for Intel is worth it.
Well, it's not a leverage thing. It would be they can hire somebody for a role for 6 months and then let them go without having to pay severance.
I mean leverage in terms of options of what they want to do.
Yes.
Moving on to the final question for tonight. Have we got more or one more to go?
That was the final one that I have.
Oh.
There are no more questions asked on the Discord.
Maybe this. Let's just end it off with this really simple one. What node was Zen 3B on? That is on 7 nanometer.
Yeah, Zen 3 is going to be 7 nanometers. Yeah. We still don't know if it's EUV or not. They're really keeping that one close to the chest.
I don't think it matters that much if it's EUV.
I don't think it is. I just don't think it is, because I don't believe they've got the volume. And a lot of people maybe don't realize this, but last year ASML were shipping a lot of EUV machines. However, Samsung were getting 80% of those. You would just assume that TSMC were because we know that TSMC were going to be using EUV at 7. Samsung have already been using EUV at 7 nanometers.
Though it has been giving them problems.
Yeah, it has been giving them problems, yeah. But a lot of people say as well that maybe they're just using it as a sort of test vehicle for the 5 nanometers at Samsung.
Yeah, if you can get all your teething stuff out of the way with 7 and apply that to your 5, you can make your 5 transition a lot faster.
5 just entered mass production very recently, didn't it?
They're only about a month behind TSMC from a chart that I saw, or 2 months on 5.
So
and yet, they've got a bunch of EUV machines that TSMC doesn't appear to have. So that's an interesting one to think about.
They probably made the gamble to be able to catch up to TSMC, and their gamble has probably paid off. Now they have all these EUV machines that they can use for their 5 nanometer, and TSMC, while getting the benefit of maybe a cheaper product because TSMC kind of paid for it all, they have the downside of not having to actually gain all that and then actually transition to EUV and 5 nanometer.
And make no mistake about it, Samsung are absolutely massive. And I mean, they maybe never had an amazing node. The 14 was decent. It was not as good as TSMC's 16, obviously. And they kind of messed up 7 by the looks of things. But if I've got these nanosheets that I'm talking about, or like I talked about earlier, this is probably coming at 3 nanometers, then, I would not write off Samsung at all, even though I firmly believe TSMC are still the better company. It's interesting to think about, but certainly Zen 3 will be on TSMC 7 nanometers, and I would strongly bet it's going to be this 7P. It's not going to be EUV. I think also TSMC have used 7 as a test vehicle for 5, and that's when we will truly see EUV being used throughout the fabs. And also Intel too, who will have it at 7 nanometers in 2023.
Well, I think with that, unless if you have something, Matthew?
Nope.
Okay, well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the podcast. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you guys for listening as well. We will be back hopefully next week with some newer topics. There wasn't a whole lot of new news generated this week, so we'll be waiting with bated breath to see what the new week brings. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, comment, of course, throw some questions into the Discord or into the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe and ring the bell as well so you can get notifications when the next video comes out. And we'll see you in the next one.
Catch you later, guys.